Disaster Law Interest Group webinar, and it's the third and the last in the 2018 series, which explores the role of disaster law in a number of contemporary settings. I'm Cathy Samuel. I'm the co-chair of the DLIG, together with Arnold Pronto, who's joining us today also, and I'm hosting today's webinar. Today we're looking at the extremely important topic of the International Atomic Energy Agency Framework for Emergency Preparedness and Response from both a legal and an operational perspective. And these are extremely timely issues. Only last week I was in Rome for the European Forum on Disaster Risk Reduction, reviewing the Sendai framework, looking at the very issues of better understanding man-made and technological risk. We're both delighted and honoured to have contribute to this third webinar two very distinguished and experienced speakers. First, Ms. Carolyn Johnson, who's been the legal advisor and the director of the IAEA Office of Legal Affairs since 2011. And I think I can say had something of a baptism of fire upon assuming her post when the Fukushima Daiichi incident occurred. We're equally delighted to have with us Elena Bukova, Head of Incident and Emergency Center of the IAEA, who joined the agency in 2002 and has considerable both national and international policy and operational expertise, including of radiation protection and preparedness for emergency response from Belarus, which was badly affected by Chernobyl, and who also has first-hand experience of dealing with the Fukushima accident. In terms of the structure of today's webinar, Perry and Elena will speak for approximately 30 minutes. And then there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers that will be dealt with by Elena, who will just explain a few logistical issues now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katya.
Thank you, Katya. Just few minutes about logistics. Dear participants, so right now when we will be speaking and when Katya will speak in, you are all muted. During our talks, which will last together for 30 minutes, you will be able to already write questions. So please don't hesitate to start writing your questions to both of us while we are speaking. And after we will finish, then there will be question and answer session, and you can also post your questions verbally. In order to do it, so please raise your hand and you will be unmuted and we will be seeing you, all of us will be seeing you on the screen. You will ask your question and then again everyone will be muted while we are answering. So we are looking forward to the active question and answer session. So these are the logistics. Thank you. So now back to Perry for her presentation.
Thank you so much, Elena, and also to Katya and Arnold for inviting Elena and I to join you and the American Society of International Law Disaster Law Interest Group for this webinar. We always love the opportunity to share with experts outside of the agency about what we're doing here in terms of all of our work, but also in the area of emergency preparedness and response. And so as Katya has mentioned, I'm going to be talking for about 15 minutes on our framework for emergency preparedness and response, and then from a legal perspective. And then I'm going to hand it over to Elena, who, as Katya mentioned, is heading our Incident and Emergency Center. So she's really at the heart of the operations of the agency's role in handling nuclear and radiological emergencies. And you all should be excited to know that we're sitting right here. This is being filmed right here in the steering group room, which is one of the rooms of the center. And I've convened here when we've had drills that are organized by Elena and her team, and we're doing these drills on a regular basis. So this is an important room in the work of the Incident and Emergency Center. So I want to start by, just for those of you who don't really know the agency so well, we were established over 60 years ago, and our mandate, as set out in our statute, which is here, is to accelerate and enlarge the contribution of atomic energy to peace, health, and prosperity throughout the world. And the head of the organization is Director General Yukiya Amano of Japan. And he has decided during his tenure here that our motto needed to be refreshed. We've been known for many years as Atoms for Peace. And now we have added and development. So we're Atoms for Peace and Development. And this was done on the occasion of our 60th anniversary. And it's now been decided that we will continue to use this new motto. And the reason is because in addition to our well-known activities in terms of nuclear safeguards and peaceful use of nuclear material, we have a huge role to play in terms of research, collaboration, transfer of technology, and development of peaceful uses of the atom. All of this is enshrined in Article 3A6 of our statute, which you can see on our website for those of you who are interested to find out more about the statute. And that Article 3A6 empowers the agency to, and I'm quoting, establish or adopt standards of safety for protection of health and minimization of danger to life and property in the field of atomic energy, and to provide for the application of these standards to our own operations, as well as to the operations and use of materials, services, equipment, facilities, and information made available by the agency. So that is the relevant mandate for what we're going to be talking about, actually. It's the basis for which we engage issues of emergency preparedness and response, as this relates to the many peaceful applications of atomic energy. So here in the agency, the Director General is depositary for 17 multilateral instruments, legal instruments in the nuclear field. And these can cover safety, security, safeguards, and civil liability for nuclear damage. Also, our technical cooperation program, which is the main vehicle in the agency that we channel our assistance to member states. 4 of these instruments directly relate to the need for emergency preparedness and response. And those are the Convention on Nuclear Safety, the Joint Convention on the Safety of Spent Fuel Management and on the Safety of Radioactive Waste Management, and the Early Notification and Assistance Convention. I just would also mention that the Convention on the Physical Protection of Nuclear Material and its 2005 amendment, while these are nuclear security instruments, they also address the need for the parties to notify and exchange information with respect to nuclear security events. So now what I'd like to focus on which is really the heart of our emergency and preparedness response framework, is the Early Notification and Assistance Convention. And these were both adopted at the special session of the General Conference. Our General Conference is like the UN General Assembly in New York in September 1986. And these 2 treaties were a direct response to the Chernobyl accident. So first, the Early Notification Convention. And again, the conventions that I'm referring to, if you want more information, you will find lots of information on our website. You can look at legal or treaties, and you can access information, and you can also look in the nuclear safety area, and you'll find lots more, too, on the work of Elena and her team. So the Early Notification Convention was adopted, as I mentioned, on 26 September 1986, and it entered into force very soon thereafter, on 27 October 1986. There are currently 122 parties to this treaty, and 4 of these parties are organizations like Euratom, the FAO, WHO, and WMO. So these are 3 UN system organizations, and Euratom, of course, is part of the EU framework. So the objective of the Early Notification Convention is to strengthen the international response to nuclear accidents by providing a mechanism for rapid information exchange in order to minimize transboundary radiological consequences in an accident in which a release of radioactive material occurs or is likely to occur. The convention applies to any accident occurring at a nuclear reactor, at a nuclear fuel cycle facility or radioactive waste management facility, as well as to activities involving radioisotopes used for agricultural, industrial, medical, and related scientific and research purposes. Any party to the convention is required to notify such accidents from which a release of radioactive material occurs or is likely to occur and that may have transboundary consequences. And this is set out in Article 2 of the Convention. Notification is made either directly between the parties to the convention or through the IAEA to all states that are likely or actually affected by the accident. The state party notifying the accident also has to provide information regarding the nature, the time of occurrence, the location of the accident, where appropriate. Article 5 of the Convention lists the information to be provided by the notifying state. This information that's reflected in Article 5 is essential for the affected party or potentially affected states so that they can adopt the appropriate protective measures to minimize the radiological consequences of such accidents. The Convention assigns a large number of responsibilities to the agency. These are set out in Article 4 of the Convention. In particular, the agency is required when notified of an accident under the Convention to inform all states parties, member states, other states that may be physically affected, and relevant international organizations of a notification received and promptly provide other information on request. The information exchange mechanism established by the Convention, which Elena will talk about in more detail, is based on a 24-hour national contact point by each state party to which a notification can be directed, as well as competent authorities who are authorized to send notifications and verify information provided. And this is addressed in Article 7 of the Convention. An up-to-date list of such national contact points competent authorities is maintained by the IAEA and provided to states parties, member states, and relevant international organizations. In the context of the Convention, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that Article 1 of the Convention requires both a transboundary release and a facility from which the transboundary release occurs. If either or both elements are missing, the notification convention is not triggered. So we've talked about this in recent times here in the agency. It's been something that our member states and contracting parties to the convention have been discussing. And some have the view that that presents a bit of a gap in the convention. And the point that we like to convey as a legal matter is that the convention was negotiated and this is the text. So to the extent that contracting parties want to modify that, it would require a legal amendment, a legally binding amendment to the convention. So that is a quick overview of the Early Notification Convention, highlighting key aspects of the convention itself. And I'd like to turn now to briefly give you an overview of the Assistance Convention. So the Convention on Assistance in the case of a nuclear accident or radiological emergency was adopted at the same time as the Early Notification Convention and entered into force on 26 February 1987. There are 117 countries, and 4 of these, the same 4 that I mentioned, Euratom, FAO, WHO, and WMO, are organizations that are parties. So the objective of the Assistance Convention is to strengthen the international response to a nuclear accident or radiological emergency by providing a mutual assistance mechanism with a view to minimizing the consequences of such nuclear accidents and radiological emergencies. The Assistance Convention aims at facilitating requests for and provision of assistance in the event of a nuclear accident or radiological emergency, and to promote, facilitate, and support cooperation between states parties to that end. While the Early Notification Convention covers all accidents described in Article 1 of the Convention, that I mentioned the scope, the Assistance Convention covers all nuclear accidents and radiological emergencies, irrespective of cause, including nuclear security events. Article 1 of the Assistance Convention, which sets the basic undertakings of the parties establishes an obligation for states parties to cooperate between themselves and the agency in order to facilitate prompt assistance in the event of a nuclear accident or radiological emergency, to minimize its consequences and to protect life, property, and the environment from the effect of radioactive releases. And that I'm quoting. So that text is straight from Article 1 of the Assistance Convention. This provision does not place any restriction on the Convention's application depending on possible causes of the radiological emergency. Also, paragraph 1 of Article 2, Provisions of Assistance, which establishes the right of states parties to request assistance, does not prescribe a trigger condition for activating the Convention as regards, in particular, the origin of the radiological emergency. It rather provides that assistance may be requested in the event of a nuclear accident or radiological emergency, whether or not such accident or emergency originates within its territory, jurisdiction, or control. And that is actually quoting from the provision itself. Furthermore, there is no limitation in respect of the origin of the radiological emergency in any other provisions of the Convention, including those specifying the obligations and functions of the agency. So in the event of a nuclear accident or radiological emergency, a state party shall call for assistance from any other state party and from the agency directly or through the IAEA and specify the type and scope of assistance needed. This is set out in Article 2 of the Convention. And as is the same in the case of the Early Notification Convention, each state party and the agency are to identify a 24-hour national contact point to which a request for assistance can be directed, as well as competent authorities who are authorized to send requests and arrange for the provision of assistance, set out in Article 4 of the Convention. As for the Notification Convention, the IAEA also maintains an up-to-date list of such authorities and contact points. Another important element of the Assistance Convention is the requirement under Article 2.4 that state parties identify and notify the agency within the limits of their capabilities, experts, equipment, and materials which may be made available to other states parties in the event of a nuclear accident or radiological emergency. The agency, in turn, is required to collect and disseminate such information to states parties and member states. In this context, you'll hear a bit more from Elena. I think she'll talk a bit more about our Response and Assistance Network, because these two treaties that I'm describing, they're really implemented through what we call practical arrangements. And these are things that Elena will be telling you a bit more about. And the Response and Assistance Network is one of the ones that got a lot of attention post-Fukushima because member states and contracting parties wanted to know how do you channel assistance, how can we offer assistance, how can you receive assistance. So I will allow Elena to talk a bit more about that with you. The Assistance Convention assigns other functions to the IAEA, including making available to a state party or a member state requesting assistance appropriate resources for the purposes of conducting an initial assessment of the accident. We transmit requests for assistance and relevant information to states parties that may possess the necessary resources. We offer good offices to the states parties or member states. We liaise with relevant international organizations to obtain and exchange relevant information. And on request, we coordinate the assistance at the international level as it becomes available. The Assistance Convention contains additional provisions relating to confidentiality of information, reimbursement of costs, privileges and immunities, and provisions on claims and compensation. These are really important provisions because when you're party to this convention and these provisions you've accepted, then we're able to move quickly in an emergency. Obviously, if there's an emergency, who has time to negotiate provisions regarding liability or the legal status of the people and protection of the people who are offering assistance? So the convention provides this framework. Both the assistance and notification are supplemented, as I mentioned, by a number of practical operational arrangements. These have been established by the IAEA Secretariat, as well as with guidance and endorsement of our policymaking organs. That is our Board of Governors, primarily, which is our executive organ, comprised of 35 member states that actually manage the organization, as well as through the meetings of competent parties, as I refer to them, who are identified under both the early notification and assistance conventions. The incident and emergency system of the agency is primarily fulfilled through the Incident and Emergency Center, which we have talked about and in which we're standing right now. So now I want to segue. I've given you now a very brief overview of both conventions. It's very, very brief. I want to just turn now to briefly say, how am I doing on time? I think, am I doing on time? Okay. Just briefly, I want to say a little bit about what enhancements we've seen to the framework, because everybody wants to know what's changed since Fukushima. So, and as Katya mentioned, we were both here. I was here, Elena was here during that period. And so what we like to say is that the legal framework is not static. And so when there are these types of events, not that we want these events, but they do shape the legal framework. It's always an opportunity to strengthen the framework. And so this is the same for the Fukushima accident. The Director General reported to the Board of Governors shortly after the Fukushima accident, and this is a quote, that the current international emergency response framework needs to be reassessed. It was designed largely in the wake of the Chernobyl disaster in 1986, before the information revolution. It reflects the realities of the 1980s, not of the 21st century. So, in the aftermath of the accident, a formal proposal to amend the Early Notification Convention was submitted by the Russian Federation in order to strengthen the provisions of the convention, in particular on the prompt notification of the concerned parties and the agency within a defined time period by the state on whose territory the accident occurred. However, this proposal did not receive the required support to be considered in accordance with Article 14 of the Convention. So you have to have a certain number of member states supporting it before you can move it forward as an amendment. Notwithstanding, a number of mechanisms to strengthen the implementation of the conventions have been implemented. And again, these are reflected not as formal amendments to the convention, but in the practical arrangements that are actually the day-to-day way we implement. These practical arrangements, as I mentioned, Elena is going to be talking more about. But just to give an example, this operations manual for incident and emergency communication, this was updated further to Fukushima. The response and assistance network, that also was updated further to Fukushima. We call it a joint plan. It's a joint radiation emergency management plan, which is the one where all the UN system organizations come together and divide up the roles. You know, who does what in an emergency or accident. This was updated. In particular, it was updated to bring in new participants, such as the CTBTO, so the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization was added as a participant to that. So all of these documents have been extensively reviewed and revised to incorporate lessons from Fukushima, and also they're complemented by a suite of safety standards, which I'm not going to go in. But of course, as I told you from the very beginning, one of our technical mandates is that we adopt safety standards. So there are a number of safety standards that are also directly relevant to emergency preparedness and response. And these are established by our Emergency Preparedness and Response Standard Committee. This was established in 2015. And they have the responsibility of increasing coordination and consistency of the EPR aspects within the IAEA safety standards at large. And let's see, I think those are the main points that I would like to share with you. And I would just end on at all that I've set out in terms of the conventions. It's living. We are interpreting the convention, including today, although I can't go into details, but including today, we are, the legal office supporting Elena and her team, supporting these instruments today. The conventions, it's not like something historic. it's living. And so in our day-to-day work, when there are issues that arise, even issues that arise that don't come to our attention, we're looking at the provisions, we are assessing what our responsibilities are and how we can support and so on. So, and the last point, that the Fukushima accident was an opportunity to refresh, and I've given you a couple examples of how that was done. And with that, I turn it over to Elena Bugleva. Thank you so much.
So let's turn to the operational aspects. Perry explained the foundation, legal foundation for the operational aspects which are developed to implement emergency preparedness and response roles of the IAEA. Now let's see how it works. First of all, I want to say and refer to what was already pronounced, that a legal foundation is a living foundation. And it is developed through decisions of policy-making organs of the IAEA and through the operational arrangements which are developed based on the foundation and taking into account lessons learned from actual responses and from exercises. Incident and Emergency Center of the IAEA is an entity in our organization through which the emergency preparedness and response roles of the IAEA are implemented. And here I would like to go straight to our mandate and also to our response roles to demonstrate how do these roles implemented based on regional arrangements which we develop. So our mandate of the Incident and Emergency Center is to be a focal point for emergency preparedness and response for nuclear and radiological safety or security-related emergencies, and to implement 5 agencies' roles in this regard. So the first role of the IAEA in response to emergencies is related to notification and information exchange. This is being done through designated contact points in member states and international organizations. A notification convention, which was already mentioned, obliges member state parties to the convention and the IAEA to designate 24/7 contact points. So you see here the connection between the foundation, legal foundation, and the operational implication of this foundation. So how to establish this 24/7 contact point? How to make sure that we here in the IEC know where to call, whom to call, and what to do if the phone is not working on the other side. So all these things are explained in the document which is called Operational Manual for Incident and Emergency Communication. And this document, which I have in my hand, is dated 2012. But the first document of the same nature was developed in 1999. Actually, in few months, in January of next year, we can celebrate the anniversary, 20 years of such operational document being in place as an international arena in the hands of member states, in the hands of international organizations, and in the hands of the staff of the agency's emergency center. It describes in details what different parties need to do in case of different types of emergencies, different scenarios, what is expected from member states, from international organizations, what is expected from the IAEA. So here it's written which channels to use: emails, fax, password-protected websites, Unified System for Information Exchange in Incidents and Emergencies, or USI, and how to get into contact with the IAEA. So this is the first role. And I mentioned very briefly abbreviation USI, so password-protected website. I would like to say a bit more about it. This is the channel of the agency, which is available 24/7 for secured transfer and storage of the information. Secured means that it could be done in an encrypted way, and also it's utilizing two-factor authentication between the users. So you can see that this is the channel state-of-the-art arrangements which could be used by all involved. The second role of the IAEA is provision of public information. Based on the technical data, technical messages, technical statements which we are getting from the contact points all over the world, we are developing public messages. which are then posted on the agency's homepage and available to the public throughout the world. We have seen during Fukushima how important it is to provide public with timely and clear information. How important it is to provide it via various channels, including not only public statements on the agency website, but also agency's Facebook. All this was in use in 2011. Third role of the agency. Third role of the agency is relatively new. And again, here I would like to refer to what was mentioned by Perry, that legal framework, international arrangement, this is a living foundation living process. In 2011, the Fukushima Daiichi accident, agency was given a role to provide results of agency's assessment of the situation and prognosis of its consequences. So this is our new role, which we did not have in March 2011, and it was given to us and then agreed by member states in the Nuclear Safety Action Plan. Actually, very quickly after March 2011, in September 2011, it was already agreed during the General Conference and Board of Governors. So within this role, agency, based on the data from member states, through its competent authority, makes an assessment and then in close coordination with the accident state and other states who may provide their assessment, release the consolidated version of assessment and prognosis. The fourth role of the agency is provision of assistance. And again, it was mentioned already by Perry, RANET, Response and Assistance Network. I am showing you another document. This is a manual which describes RANET in details. And again, same thing as for the first one, ICOM, this is a living document. It started from 2000. And we have several iterations of this manual. This is the latest, which was published in 2018. This manual describes all arrangements for RANET. Response and Assistance Network comprises member states which are willing and capable to provide assistance around the world to other member states upon request in different areas, whether it's dose reconstruction, source search or recovery, provision of advice at the nuclear power plant accident, or medical assistance. All these capabilities could be registered by member states in RANET, and then, upon request, when IAEA provides assistance through IAEA Assistance Mission, we are also utilizing capabilities of member states registered in RANET. How quickly we are doing it? Well, we aim to take off within 24 hours after getting request for agent assistance. And within this period of time, we actually not only receive assistance with visas, tickets, and so on, but we also develop assistance action plan. This is a document which highlights roles and responsibilities of all involved parties, and it's being signed by the agency, by RANET member states participating in the IAEA Assistance Mission, and by the accident state. All these things are done within 24 hours for agent request for assistance. And fifth role of the IAEA, and this is provision of interagency coordination. I'm referring now to Joint Radiation Emergency Management Plan of International Organizations, or JOINT Plan. If you search through the records and different references which were developed during Fukushima Daiichi accident, you can find many references to the J Plan, because J Plan was activated at that time. IAEA coordinated actions between international organizations, members of Interagency Committee on Radiological and Nuclear Emergencies, or IACNE, and IC provided secretariat for this role. Right now we have 18 international intergovernmental organizations registered in IACNE, and together we developed this joint plan. It comprises not only those organizations which are actually always involved in response to any emergency, like, for example, World Health Organization, Food and Agriculture Organization, but also those organizations which have expertise in some specific types of emergencies. Like, for example, if emergency is happening at the sea, International Maritime Organization, they are a sponsor of the joint plan. Or ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, they are also co-sponsoring them. So these are 5 roles. Now, what do we have in place in the agency within this operational arrangement in order to fulfill these 5 roles 24/7? Right now, as we speak, there are people on call, and there are 7 specialists on call who are ready to fulfill these response roles. They are having a shift for 1 week, and then they rotate for a new group. Overall, IEC, Incident and Emergency Center, is utilizing expertise of staff of the IAEA throughout all departments and all divisions. So we have very strong system of training in place through which experts in different fields are trained on agency's procedures in order to be able to fulfill these 5 response roles within designated time objectives. So everything is in the checklist, instructions, which we have in place in the operational area and based on which people are trained. We also have a very active system of exercises, not only with participation of member states when they're playing, but also for the incident and emergency system of the IAEA, where all members of the system, from Director General to the logistics support officers, are playing, and it's happening at least once per quarter. So through these exercises, we're also getting new knowledge how to look at existing arrangements and what needs to be changed, learning from experience through not only actual responses but also through the exercises. And in such a way, we really make it so, like was mentioned, that International EPR Framework and the legal basis of the framework, its operational arrangements, are living and getting best information and best practices from whatever could be captured and taken on board. So this is, in short, what we have as operational arrangements. I would also like to invite you to look at the agency's website in the area of legal arrangements, in the area of emergency preparedness and response, where you can find many references to those documents which were mentioned by both Perry and myself, and many more information which could be useful with specific cases and case studies. Thank you. So now we go to the part of questions and answers, and ready to answer questions, if any.
Yeah, okay. A huge thank you to both of you, Perry and Elena, for such a comprehensive marathon. What really is a vast framework, and just giving us some insights into the very extensive mechanisms and processes that are in place. And I have to say, from a disaster law perspective, it's just so helpful to have both law and the operational side together. Because often you hear about it in isolation, so you hear about the legal framework, or you may hear about the optional aspects, but to actually hear and get some insights as to how they work and they sit alongside in action is it's very informative and insightful. Not least as a sort of little plug, one of the things I find, even in the context of discussion on disaster risk reduction and the Sendai framework, is that often different sectors are very busy, doing very important work, but not always with a full understanding of what the legal tools can offer, both sort of operationally or in terms of, for example, informing scientific and technological sectors as well. So a huge thank you, first of all. If I might indulge as the moderator of this session with a question. In July this year, the OECD published a report in which it was encouraging the development of more multi-hazard integrated responses, and it drew upon the experiences of the nuclear sector as best practice. And I would very much welcome your thoughts, both legally, operationally, in terms of clearly, because of the disaster impact that a nuclear incident would have, the nuclear sector has the most developed frameworks and thinking in terms of disaster risk reduction management. And I would very much welcome, your thoughts in terms of what sort of principles or best practices do you think might be transferable to other areas, so non-nuclear sectors, in terms of learning from you on how to better integrate their responses to reduce disaster risk and ultimately disaster impact?
Thank you, Katya. So I will start addressing this question. It's this multi-hazard approach or all-hazard approach. This is a concept which IAEA has in place already for decades. And in our safety standards and in our operational document, that's what we are promoting. When we also assist member states in establishing or strengthening the API arrangement, this is the approach we are promoting. For example, in our requirements, GSR Part 7, on requirements for preparedness and response to nuclear and radiological emergencies, we are clearly saying that countries need to take and to utilize all-hazard approach in planning for nuclear and radiological emergencies. What does it mean in practical terms? It means that there is no need to develop separately plans and procedures at the national level or at facility or ministry level for contingency emergencies, natural disasters, or nuclear radiological emergencies. To the extent possible, this should be integrated, like, for example, capabilities, arrangements, revenues which exist to evacuate public in case of natural disaster, used also for evacuation in case of nuclear radiological emergencies. So in such a way, it will be also a decrease of costs, utilizing all experience gained through training for natural disasters to take on board in case of evacuation during nuclear radiological emergencies. And so through such approach, we are actually promoting most efficient way of building EPR capabilities. What we're also doing right now, and I'd like to use an opportunity to promote this development, based on lessons learned from Fukushima Daiichi accident, and as summarized and highlighted in the observations and lessons of agency's report on Fukushima Daiichi accident, and specifically in the volume 3 of the report, we are now at the latest stage of development of a very practical document which explains in practical means how to develop arrangements and capabilities to respond to so-called combined emergencies when, for example, natural disaster is ongoing, but in parallel there is a nuclear or radiological emergencies being developed. So how to deal with efficient use of resources how to deal with the provision of assistance. So all these type of things is now in this document, which will be published in EPR series. This is not a safety standard, but a technical document with a lot of details and technical information, case studies. So it will be coming soon and will be available on the agency's website in several months.
I think Elena has really covered the question, but I just want to highlight just very briefly, the treaties themselves that I described also highlight the fact that there needs to be an integrated response. It's why you see FAO, Food and Agriculture, is party to both of the conventions. WHO organization is party to both of the conventions. So right from the foundation, and I guess that's why the OECD is using nuclear as an example, we brought in key stakeholders in these conventions. Of course, we could always welcome more, and so any other international organizations could also choose to become a party. But having WMO, WHO, FAO right there with us as the foundational instruments is significant. And then, as Elena talked about in some detail, and I also mentioned, the J plan is another obvious example of this. So when you have a nuclear accident, there is the health issue, there's the food issue, so all the consequences of that. And so the J plan is exactly to make sure that all the expertise from all the UN system and other organizations is available to address in an integrated way the consequences of a nuclear or radiological accident. So, as Elena says, we've been doing this for decades.
Yes.
So, thank you. Are there any other questions, either or live?
If I may just say thank you for that, and I think you've answered the question in the sense that are there key lessons and principles that the non-nuclear sectors could benefit from in terms of those more all-integrated, all-hazard approaches. I think you've made it very clear that there are some real lessons and transferable good practices to other sectors, not least because you've been doing it for so long within the agency. And I'll leave to see if anyone else would like to ask a question.
Hello, Katya. Hello, this is Arnold from New York. Perry, Elena, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you, Arnold.
Yes, you don't see me, unfortunately. I'm only through an audio, but it's really good to see both of you. Thank you for a really fascinating presentation. It really is a model, if I may say, and we're very impressed and interested in how you proceed in linking the treaty and the operational aspects. Could I ask you to go a bit further on the pre-disaster, the emergency preparedness aspect? You mentioned there is a committee that deals with emergency preparedness in terms of perhaps if you wouldn't mind just expanding a little bit on the mandate and the kind of activities that are involved, and Perry, to what extent is you spoke of the treaties being live treaties, that they really are interpreted and developed based on operational needs and so on. To what extent are the treaties that you refer to also flexible enough to take on board new thinking and new ideas on the emergency preparedness, sort of the pre-disaster phase work? I know you've already alluded to some of the actions and activities that you're involved in, including in the response you just given to Katya. But and if you wouldn't mind, just go a bit further, because a lot of your presentation was about the response phase, and I appreciate that that's the main focus of the agency. But to the extent that there are preparedness activities involved, I'd be very interested in hearing about those too. Thank you.
Okay, so you mentioned committee. I presume this is about EPRES, Emergency Preparedness and Response Standards Committee, which Perry mentioned with regard to preparedness. And yeah, this is a very good question, because preparedness is taking at least 50% of activities of the incident and emergency center, both in terms of preparedness of Secretariat and assisting member states to prepare. And this committee, EPRESC, ESC, has a very important role to play in terms of developing documents, specific types of documents for member states. Here just a few words about approach in developing these specific documents or safety standards by the IAEA. We have, by the mandate of the IAEA, statutory role, we have a mandate to develop safety standards in different areas. And how we develop these standards? With involvement of member states and through committees. There is a structure of committees. On top, there is a Commission of Safety Standards, CSS, and below there are topical committees which are covering topics of emergency preparedness and response, radiation safety, nuclear safety, waste safety, and transport safety, so 5 in total. In addition, we have Nuclear Security Guidance Committee. Yes, do you hear us?
I think continue. It looks like we may have lost him, but I think for the others you can.
Do you hear us? Okay.
I do hear. Please continue. There was some
we had some sounds. So these committees and through these committees, the agency is seeking inputs and comments and, after all, consensus with member states in developing each and every safety standards. This is the role. What is the membership? Countries, all member states, are invited to nominate their members. And there is a terms of references for committees and same for EPRESC, for EPR committee. So it's experts from member states in the area of EPR, different organizations, could be competent authorities under Early Notification Convention and Assistance Convention, but not necessarily. There are meetings several times per year at which draft documents are presented and discussed, and comments are discussed. Then also there is a part on the website of the agency for the members where all draft documents are posted before the meetings, and committee members are reviewing them, and then at the actual meetings they're coming with the comments and so on. So it's very meticulous process which leads to the development of a consensus document which is then approved either by the General or Board of Governors depending on the level of safety standards.
And Arnold, I would just add, in terms of the assistance convention, I gave a short overview. I went over my time, but even so, it's still so short. But if you're really interested, Article 5 of the Assistance Convention.
It's a very good point to keep reminding users, to keep reminding countries that actually everything is there in the convention.
Right. No, thank you very much. If I may just ask one slight follow-up, to what extent does the agency provide a platform or a context in which international cooperation in preparedness may take place? Or is this just really a sort of a bilateral arrangement between the agency and any member state that requests assistance? Can the agency help facilitate cooperation between member states, or the sharing of best practices that may come from member states? Is that any involvement there? And I have a specific reason for asking that, but I don't know if this is something that's within the mandate of your work.
You mean cooperation at the preparedness stage?
Yes.
Yes, precisely. So notification and so on.
Well, look, we work with member states, we work with international organizations. Like, for example, all these workshops and symposia and meetings, technical meetings which we have, where international organizations are coming and member states, through these we are actually sharing information about best practices, identifying gaps and finding solutions, and it's international cooperation after all, because the solution or lessons or best practice is being discussed and summarized and concluded with involvement of all parties. So from this perspective, that's one example of how we do this international cooperation.
Yeah, exchange of information.
Yep.
Exchange of information and publications.
And through publications, And here to note that, for example, these safety standards which we develop, in EPR, we have numerous number of international organizations co-sponsoring. Actually, EPR safety standards are having highest number of co-sponsors. Requirements, which I mentioned, have 13 international organizations co-sponsoring. So it means basically agreed one voice message.
Thank you very much. That's really interesting. You know, the reason I ask, but it's just more for information, that it's interesting to us to see that that type of cooperation takes place within the confines of a legal instrument of law. And the reason I say that is that one of the issues of discussion here at the UN and the possible treaty on the protection of persons in the event of disasters, one of the inflection points or one of the issues of debate is precisely whether it's appropriate or not to have a risk reduction discussed within a legal instrument. And here we are talking about precisely that type of activity that talks within a broader framework, a legal framework that has the boundaries and provides the mandate for that type of activity. It's really, really fascinating to see that. And thank you very much.
Arnold, don't forget the context which I set up. This is post-Chernobyl. This was adopted so fast, these treaties, because you know how long it takes to adopt treaties. These were adopted so fast after Chernobyl, and it was a recognition that there was no international cooperation. There was no international framework. There was no international exchange on emergency preparedness. So it's why they were able to reach agreement on this. And it takes, we always say in the nuclear area, it takes an event like a Chernobyl, like a Fukushima, that has helped to mobilize the consensus of the member states, so that they could actually conclude these things and agree on more measures.
Yeah, Perry, we would agree with that. The work on our end here was triggered by the Asian tsunami. Really, it was that precisely that recognition that there wasn't a framework in place that really got people thinking and working on this, and it's perhaps a little in a sense tragic that one has to wait for these events to take place in order for the decision makers to start working. But no, thank you very much. I don't know if Katja, I see Katja may be back on. She may have reconnected. I don't know if she has anything for the.
She's there.
And I think that's a very pertinent note on which to conclude this webinar. And, sadly, it can be a reality in some contexts that sometimes it does take an incident to get the sort of the consensus which is required. But nonetheless, as both on the legal side and the operational side, we continue to look at to the agency many of the principles, the good practices which have been developed through, significant events, and continue to advocate of how these are transferable to non-nuclear hazard and risk, and how much can be learned from other sectors that don't have to experience the disaster effects for themselves. So, Perry and Elena, again, we're just immensely grateful to you. I'm sure this has come at the end of another very busy, reactive week for both of you, and I trust that very soon your weekend is going to begin in Vienna, hopefully bringing nice things like the Christmas markets to you. But again, just thank you. It's such a privilege, to have both of you, give your time for us and the disaster law to, really benefit from your insights. And again, just such a treasured experience to bring the law and the operational together and see how absolutely integrated they are in practice. So once again, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to sharing your insights with others. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.